And part of that is what we're going to be getting into today. So we kick off this new series based on a book by a new friend of mine named Mark Feldmeir. He is a pastor of a large United Methodist church outside of the Denver area. And his theology is very much aligned with what we peddle around here. And he's just a cool guy. If you haven't picked up the book, you're not going to get a better deal than what you're getting it for here at Crosswalk, because we bought in bulk and got a sweet deal on that. His writing is very interesting, kind of poetic in the way he lays it out. And I think his thoughts are great. So if you've started a book, that's awesome. I hope you continue to enjoy it. He starts off the first chapter with really an interesting story where he's an early seminarian, and he goes into a revered, world-renowned professor's office for a consult. And he's having this conversation as he's starting in his first year of seminary. And the professor is fidgeting around in his desk drawer, and he pulls out a gun and points it at Mark. And he says, "Do you believe in God?" And Mark says, "Yes, I believe in God." And the professor goes on, and this professor, he kind of elaborates. This is the quintessential professorial look, right? He's got the tweed jacket. He rides a bike. He's kind of a hippie, kind of a guy. He even said that he smoked, I'm going to get this pronunciation wrong, that he smokes a little, is it peyote? Is that how you pronounce it, peyote? you heathens out there, you know such things. Me and my undefiled self, who knows? But anyway, he's been known to enjoy this hallucinogenic smoke now and again. And anyway, so that's kind of the picture of this guy. And so he asked this question with the gun pointed at him, "Do you believe in God?" And he goes on, he says, "Do you believe that God is loving?" And Mark says, "Yeah, I really believe that that's what Jesus was trying to say, and so many of the people in the Jewish tradition before him." And he pulls the trigger back, or pulls the cock back, and says, "And do you believe that God is all-powerful?" And Mark says, "Yeah, I believe that God is all-powerful, that God can make anything happen and God can prevent terrible things from happening, and I'm very confident of that." And he says, "Do you believe that if I pull this trigger, that God has the capacity of stopping the bullet from entering your body?" And Mark says, "Yeah, I believe that God has that capacity." And at that moment, the professor pulls the trigger. Now, it shouldn't matter that the gun that the professor pulled out was a finger gun like mine. It wasn't a real handgun. And actually, the point was not lost on Mark Feldmeir, because he recognized that he was faced with the complexity of an unsolvable, apparently, problem. That God cannot be all-loving and all-powerful at the same time. As much as we try to do our linguistic judo around this to make it all work out, they cannot both exist. Because if God really were that powerful, God would have not had to stop the bullet from entering Mark's chest, because he could have easily stopped the professor from pulling the trigger. He could have caused instant paralysis in his hands so that he couldn't function anymore. He could have caused the gun, if it was real, to backfire or something. He could have caused the cartridge itself to not explode in the right way, to leave the chamber altogether. All kinds of things God could have done out of love for Mark. But nothing happened. Mark left that meeting with a pretend bullet in his chest. My guess is that your table talk today, and even if you didn't say anything because you hate that portion of the service when we make you talk to each other, and so maybe you didn't talk at all, but you probably thought about the answers to these questions. What makes you think that God might exist, and what makes you think that God might not exist? And my guess is that those things that contributed to you believing that God exists might have things to do with beauty. Like you say, "Oh, I see a night sky like this. This beautiful desert scene with the galaxy before you, the Milky Way right there. How can you not believe in God?" I was just on a vacation with Len, and we saw amazing, beautiful sights. There was this one that was just breathtaking. We've done this trip before with family. This was the first time it was just us. But we left Glacier Bay and we're on our way sailing to Sitka. And we left this inlet and it was kind of cloudy on the coast. And then at one moment, I come out and I look outside and I was stopped in my tracks because you could see the ocean and you could see a band of clouds. And then above the clouds were a range of 15,000-foot snow-capped mountains. It was the craziest thing. And you see scenes like that. You've been to Sierra, you've been to Tahoe, you've been to the ocean, you've been to the redwood forests. And you say, man, there's got to be a God to have such beauty in the world. Or maybe it comes through love. And there's love in your life. You've experienced love. You have love for others. Others have love for you. And so you're like, oh, because of love, I believe there has to be God. Or you see the beauty of creation unfolding, maybe in a baby or a child. And you're like, I just believe in love. And if all else fails, we've got dogs. Dogs prove God must exist because they are absolutely loving no matter what. They can't not be loving. That's it. But you have these other questions that Mark Feldmeir was posed with his little thought experiment with his professor. And I'm guessing that there are things that you've experienced and things you see in the world that you're just like, I'm just not so sure I believe in God. I'm not sure God could possibly exist with the things that we see in the world. And things might come to mind. We go to some of the biggies, of course, like the Holocaust 80 years ago. We think about the Crusades long before that and all the American slavery. I mean, there's a big list of the whoppers. But then we think about even right now. We think about the war between Russia and Ukraine. We're like, this is absolute nonsense. Hundreds of thousands of people are dying. We think about Israel and Hezbollah and Hamas and the tension that represents. I mean, like, how can God exist when such atrocities against humans are happening? I saw this in an interview just this past week where it was a mother who was interviewed because her daughter had been shot in one of the latest school shootings in Georgia. And luckily, the daughter survived, and she had a wound here and a wound somewhere around her wrist. And they talked about the horrific experience that they went through. And of course, everybody shudders when they think about a school shooting. How could there be any sense of this at all? The innocence coming under fire. But then she said something that made Lynn and I cringe a bit, which we totally understood. We didn't judge her for it because we hear it all the time everywhere. As she said, out of her gratitude, but God protected my daughter. God spared her life. God spared her life. The God who's in control spared her life out of love for my daughter. And Lynn and I sighed because even though that was a heartfelt, genuine response from her, we thought of the mothers and the fathers of the kids who didn't have their children spared. The children of the teachers who were slain that day. Where was God then? And I bet if we spent time, every one of us here could tell a story about how we couldn't make sense of the world and couldn't understand how God could exist and allow certain things to happen to certain people. Health diagnoses, tragic freak accidents. Where was God in all of that? Why couldn't God just step in and handle it? These are the questions that we're left with. And unfortunately, the Christian tradition hasn't helped us a lot historically, at least as it's been given to us now. In fact, the most common thing is just to tell people of faith to say, yeah, well, you're just going to have to play the mystery card. We just don't understand everything, but you have to believe that God is all loving and God is in control. Somehow, some way, it's all going to make sense. I wonder, John Calvin, he is probably the greatest voice in antiquity that still speaks today. He was a Protestant theologian, and he believed in the absolute power and control of God over absolutely everything. And I offered an essay for a book that's going to come out in a few months, and in it I suggest, I wonder, How many shots of Jägermeister God forced John Calvin to drink for him to say that all of the evils in the world and all the awful things that we experience will someday make sense, and we will see that it's all good and that it's all okay and just as it should have been. And I'm like, man, that guy had to be really drunk, because you cannot explain away the suffering of innocence, the horrific nature of so many examples, and say that God is somehow behind all that, and then still say that God is loving. Blaise Pascal, who lived from 1623 to 1662, you have him to thank for a variety of scientific and mathematical insights that he provided, at least for others to build on. He was also a philosopher and a Catholic, and because he was a philosopher and a Catholic, that kind of made him a theologian, because back then, if you were one, you were also the other. And he was perplexed with this idea, this tension between God being all-powerful, and he had great doubts about whether or not God even existed. And so finally, he just sort of came up with what is now known as Pascal's wager. And he kind of worked it out like this, especially given his time in history and what the church was primarily teaching, which had a lot to do with what happens after you die. And some people are going to go to heaven, and some people are going to be tortured in hell. And so he weighed it out. He said, well, okay, if I choose to believe in God and God exists, then I get to go to heaven. So that's a plus. If I choose to believe in God and God does not exist, it doesn't really matter. However, if I choose not to believe in God and God does not exist, that doesn't matter. But if I choose to say God does not exist and God actually exists, well, then I'm going to hell. So, just by a simple calculation, better to believe that God exists, just in case. And Mark Feldmeir talks about this example, and he was just kind of left wanting. It's like, oh, well, I guess, but is that really that compelling or that motivating? Does anybody really want to have a faith like that? I would guess that a lot of people have a faith kind of like that. They might not use that language, but it's like they don't want to utter the words. They don't think God even exists, because what might that mean if God does? Better play it safe. These kinds of questions are just with us all the time. C.S. Lewis, who was a great thinker, writer, theologian in his own right, he wrote in the last century some things about pain, and he has this to say about pain and suffering. He says, C.S. Lewis says, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, and shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. This is how he got his brain around the problem of pain. That, the pain is awful, but it gives us the opportunity to hear God, and sometimes God needs to do that. But then a terrible thing happened. His wife, Joy, of many years, died. And he was absolutely heartbroken. In his book, A Grief Observed, as he pondered whether God might be the eternal vivisector, the cosmic sadist, the spiteful imbecile, he confessed that in the end, you can't see anything properly while your eyes are blurred with tears. It's okay to have all these textbook academic answers, but when real life hits you over the head with pain and suffering and tragedy, those answers don't help much anymore. And that's what crippled C.S. Lewis in that moment. Pascal ended up dying, and when he did, this happened. When Pascal died, his servant found sewn into his jacket a brief document titled Memorial, which summarized his mystical experience and included the words, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, not of the philosophers and scholars. Forgetfulness of the world and of everything except God. Now, this is not a God who just made the calculation and decided to wage his bet that God existed. This is a God that Pascal is saying is beyond my reasoning, my understanding. In fact, some have suggested, as I think Pascal himself wondered, is reason itself the enemy of faith? Because it seemed like for people in that time in history with the scientific revolution and people applying the scientific theory to faith itself and finding faith wanting, faith seemed to be challenged by reason itself. And the more people reasoned, the less people believed. And so that still rings true today. There are people in churches around our country who are of a particular stripe who really downplay education altogether. There are entire swaths, in fact, I would say the majority voice in the United States only promotes schools that support what's called higher criticism. I'm going to get just nerdy for 10 seconds with you. Higher criticism and lower criticism. Actually, they only support lower criticism, which means we're only going to listen to the experts that we want to listen to in those fields that we honor and respect. But we don't want to listen to people from fields that we don't think are necessarily with God or thinking godly thoughts. So they're okay with biblical scholars who are weighing in from their camps on such things, but they're not going to talk to archaeologists who might challenge some of the things that are written in the Scripture. They're not going to talk to psychologists or sociologists or anthropologists or scientists in general, because they may have something to say that could seriously impact their concept of belief. Reason is the enemy of faith. Some people, especially in our Western world, I'm absolutely certain that that's how it feels. Like there's no other option. And in fact, I would guess, and I don't think I'm wrong on this, and I think a lot of writers agree with me on this, or I agree with them, that the mass exodus we see in our country right now, and really in the Western world as a whole, of people not just leaving churches, but people leaving faith itself. It's different than it has been in previous generations when people would just get to their young adulthood and they would blow off church for a while and find themselves, and once they settled down, they'd come back. This is not then. It's a different time. And the people who are leaving because they're left with these questions, these tensions, and they can't figure out from faith itself how to deal with them. From the book, they're saying, I want to believe, but I don't know what I believe or how to believe. Maybe you see the beauty of God and you can't say no, but you see the suffering of the world and you can't stop asking why. Maybe you believe in doubt and despair and you want to know that even this is faith. But then someone, something, some collective voice says, shh. And then you stop asking why. And then you stop saying yes. And then you just stop believing. Because the churches themselves have said, shh. Have any of you ever experienced that? Yeah. I would guess that that's partly why you're here. Is because we're a church that doesn't say, shh. There's a story from our Jewish heritage in our faith. Remember, Jesus was Jewish. That's one of the confounding things to me, is we Christians, I don't understand Christians who are anti-Semitic. The one that we're following was a devout Jew. Like, what are you missing here, right? Well, our Jewish tradition has a story of a guy named Jacob. And Jacob, his story starts off weird. He's a twin, and even in the womb, he's wrestling with his brother Esau. And his name, Jacob, even means, this trickster, this one who wants to pull a position kind of thing. Well, Esau ends up getting out of the womb first, making him the older brother, which means that eventually he's going to inherit his father's whole estate, which was a lot. But Jacob remained a trickster even outside the womb and tricked his brother Esau and his father out of the family right, the family order of things, his brother's blessing as the firstborn. His brother Esau was so mad, he was an avid hunter, that Jacob knew he had to run for his life, which he did. And he spent decades away, built his life, got married, had a family, built his own fortune, but he knew that his right was to go back to his homeland and claim what was his. But he knew that when he went back, there was a chance, probably a good chance, that his brother was still really mad about what happened. So in the story, he does what people did during those times. When kings were wanting to make a deal with somebody that they were at odds with, they would sort of parade all of these goods, all of this wealth, as if to say, all this will be yours if you will accept me in peace. And so he had all of his stuff lined up for the parade the next day, but Jacob spent the night on the other side of the river, and all night long he wrestled with this angel. We're not exactly sure what to make of this. The book of Genesis is meant not to be taken as this literal, this is actually what factually occurred. It's telling us a story that has meaning and depth. And they're telling us a story that one of the patriarchs of the Jewish faith wrestled all night with God and prevailed, did not get wiped out by morning. And when the morning came, Jacob somehow had a hold on this angel who's saying, finally, release me. And Jacob says, I will not release you unless you bless me. Pretty bold thing to say to an angel of God. So the angel did him another favor. He does give him a blessing, but before he did, he zaps him in the hip so that he can't walk around very good, and forevermore he's going to walk with a limp. So he would remember the struggle that they had that night. Thank you very much for that gift, angel. But then he said, I will bless you, and I'm changing your name, the voice of God says. Your name is no longer just Jacob, but you shall be known as Israel, because you struggled with God. And when he said you struggled with God, he did not mean it as a slight or as an insult, but as a commendation. You struggled with God. That's a good thing. Some voices in our Christian tradition at large tell us if you're struggling with God, if you have doubts, that means you're not a person of faith. But the experience of Jacob, who became Israel, is that actually the act of faith itself requires us to struggle, to ask difficult questions. So in the book, he says, the Jewish sages taught that Jacob's story suggests there's another world, a dimension of the spiritual right here within this world that lies open to us whenever we awaken to it and pay attention to it. Like it's supposed to say, Jacob, like Jacob, we can access that world from this world if only we can learn to see differently. If only we can see differently. So I got this backdrop, knowing I was going to do this series at some point. I don't know, I probably got it early in the year. And I think it's really cool. Desert scene, incredible sky. There are parts in our state where you can go and see a very similar scene. If you're up in the high Sierra where there's no ambient light whatsoever, you see this in the middle of the night. It's incredible. Milky Way right there. And when you see this and you think about the people of old who came before us and walked this earth before us, you can see why they would be just amazed and just in awe of everything that they experienced. In fact, in Psalm 8, I looked this up, I just kind of quoted it in the early service, but this is what the psalmist, it's attributed to David, I don't know if he really wrote it, but this is the psalm. O Lord, our Lord, your majestic name fills the earth. Your glory is higher than the heavens. You've taught children and infants to tell of your strength, silencing your enemies and all who oppose you. When I look at the night sky and see the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars you set in place, what are mere mortals that you should think about them, human beings that you should care for them? Yet you made them only a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor. You gave them charge of everything you made, putting all things under their authority, the flocks and the herds, and all the wild animals, the birds in the sea, the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the fish in the sea, and everything that swims the ocean currents. O Lord, our Lord, your majestic name fills the earth. And if you lived in antiquity, and every morning you woke up and without fail, as long as there wasn't cloud cover, and you saw the sun rise and fall, and you saw the moon do the same, and everything clearly revolving around the earth, you would, as did every single scientist of their day, you would say the whole universe is centered on planet Earth. We are so special. We are amazing because everything is revolving around us. Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it easy then that the psalmist would say, why are you so mindful of us? And the answer is because everything revolves around us. Feeds into a wonderful human egocentricity. But then science had to come and spoil everything. Pete ends in the last midweek series that we did, How the Bible Actually Works. In the last video teaching he offers, he says, the size of the galaxy terrifies me. Because the more we understand about the galaxy, the universe, which is unfolding at an accelerating rate, the smaller we feel. We found out centuries after the psalmist wrote that, well, probably 2,000 years perhaps after the psalmist wrote that, we realized that we weren't the center of everything. In fact, we realized that planet Earth is just a part of this galaxy, which we refer to as the Milky Way, and our little solar system is just a teeny part of that thing, and this galaxy that we're a part of is just a part of who knows how many millions, maybe billions of galaxies that continue to expand everywhere. You know, when you're in an airplane and you're taking flight, and even when you're just at 10,000 feet, and if you're going over an area of habitation, if you look down, if there's a crowd of people, you might be able to see them, but you will not see an individual walking around. We're less than ants at 10,000 feet. From space, you can't see any human being at all. We're nothing. We're not even a gnat. What does it mean if our entire planet and our entire Milky Way galaxy itself is not even a speck in the expanding universe? We're that small. And if our whole galaxy and our planet is that small, how big are we? It starts to mess with us a little bit. Like, what is the point of life? What is the point of anything? It kind of can give you this weight of, am I of any value whatsoever? Because I'm just a speck on a speck on a speck. You know what I mean? Some of you may be like, why am I wasting my time here right now? There's got to be a football game on that's better than this clown on stage. Who's at least entertaining, not making me think about this horrible existential reality of my meaninglessness life, right? But here's the thing. The voices of antiquity, reaching back as far as we can imagine, they did the best they could with what they understood. To them, it looked like everything revolved around them. This massive galaxy that they couldn't put their finger on, it was beyond them. And they said, even in the expansiveness that we can understand, isn't it marvelous that somehow we still experience this thing we call God, this thisness that is more than flesh and blood, that seems to be the genesis of creation itself. And over the centuries, as science changed their mind on things, there were still people who are saying out loud, there's something more. There's something more. And I know science is saying this, which is challenging how the Bible talks about things, but that's okay because at the end of the day, there's still something more. And I don't need to have all the answers figured out, but it seems like this is sort of a more recent way of thinking, just in the last, say, 30 years. Well, more than that, but it's coming out from science more now in the last 30 years, that scientists themselves are saying, well, we kind of think there's something more. Because it doesn't make sense that creation continues to exist and that the universe continues to expand. There's something more. And the mystics everywhere are saying, there's something more. There's something more. And I think we're hearing the answer. We're hearing the call of Jacob extending to us all the way from back then on the other side of the river where he was renamed and got his hip bent out of shape, saying to us, the struggle is a part of the journey. Struggle. It's okay. It doesn't mean you're a person who lacks faith. It means you're a person who has faith. And so to all of us here today, I invite you into this meditation as we close, where we inhale and we say, I am free to not know. To exhale to say, I can rest in mystery. And by the way, when I say mystery, I don't say a mystery like John Calvin's mystery, where you have to be really drunk to say, I understand that mystery. Because I think there are reasonable ways to understand things differently now that help us make sense of why terrible things happen that aren't God's will, God doesn't want, God cannot keep them from happening, and yet we experience love in profound ways. This is the mystery that is unfolding. That mystery of understanding just how incredible God can be, even what God is. That's a mystery I can rest in. We inhale and say, I may not know what I believe, but we exhale, but I know it will sound like dignity. I love that. Inhale, my doubts are sacred. And as we exhale, God, stay close as I wander. So I'd just like you to enjoy the screen for a moment and actually do what it says. Let it take you there. Then we'll do it together, and then we'll be out of here. Let's say these words out loud together. Inhale with me. I am free to not know. And exhale. I can rest in mystery. As we inhale, I may not know what I believe, but I know it will sound like dignity. My doubts are sacred. God, stay close as I wander. Let's pray together. God, as we close our time in this space, God, what are we even saying when we're saying God? Do we even know what we mean when we're saying and we're addressing you, God? Are you God in heaven or are you God that we're swimming in right now? Either way, Spirit, life, love, shalom, God. God who is the thisness that is beyond this physicality, or who is so intertwined with our physicality, we can't tell the difference. You who are present with us through everything. You who seem to show up and stand by us, who stand by us and with us and for us. We let you know of our awe. We let you know of what we think about when we see creation in all its majesty, and when we experience love and we see newborn children and dogs who are loving and awesome. And we say, there must be a God. Our hearts swell. You, Spirit of God, who are not offended with all of our yeah, but statements, but welcome them. May we not shy away from hard questions. May we celebrate them. May we honor them. And may our curiosity drive us ever more forward, leaving the shushes behind and stepping forward into new discovery after new discovery of just who you might be as we learn together. I ask this in the name of the Jesus who we followed, who challenged everything every step of the way, who wrestled every step of the way. In his name we pray. Amen. Thank you for being here today. Hope it was worth your time. Have a great day. We'll see you next week. All right.